Captain's log, stardate 56844.9. The Enterprise has arrived at Romulus and is waiting at the designated coordinates. All our hails have gone unanswered. We've been waiting for 17 hours. Set your phasers to podcast and prepare for an intergalactic deep dive into the final frontier of Trek cinema. Join us on our Starship of Scrutiny as we navigate through the highs, the lows, and the Romulan twists of Star Trek Nemesis, from Picard's dashing doppelganger to Data's daring showdown. We'll explore every plot wormhole of this polarizing adventure, so grab your tricorder and a cup of Earl Grey, because this review is about to hit warp speed. That's right, we are back, and we are looking at Star Trek Nemesis. If you're on the Star Trek Hit or Miss channel, it's because it's part of our ongoing series of looking at Romulan-themed things. Bremen-themed, maybe, perhaps, in this case, but it's kind of related. I am your regular host, Captain Mike Wilson, and I am joined by three stalwart adventurers willing to plough the depths of this movie. As always, I'm joined by my faithful number one, DK.
Hello.
How's it going? Okay?
Yeah, not too bad, mate, thanks.
Why have you picked Worf for your avatar?
Well, I feel the dude needs some more screen time after this film.
Yes, I did read Michael Dorn wasn't very happy he got nothing to do. Bless him. And we are joined by two first-time guests to either of our podcasts here. And very happy to invite them both on. So please welcome, first of all, from Sci-Fi Queen's podcast, our very own Sci-Fi Queen, Nita. Welcome.
Hello, thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. I know we've been discussing back and forth about you being on a couple of podcasts, so glad to finally get you on board and get chatting about this one. And it should be good. And we are also joined for the first time by Justin Avery Smith. Hello, Justin.
Hello there.
That's the wrong franchise.
Yeah. I love them both equally.
Fair enough. So you all ready to start talking Nemesis then?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Let's do it.
Awesome. Well, before we do that, I do have a couple of Star Trek related questions, because I always like to ask these things of our first time guests. So apologies if it seems like it's putting you on the spot. I'm not shining 4 lights or potentially 5 in your face or anything. So it's the section that I like to call Healing Frequencies Open.
Hailing frequencies open, sir.
And I will start by asking each of you in turn the first big question, which is, what first got you into Star Trek? Can you remember the first kind of TV episode or movie that it was you saw? And was that the moment that you sort of thought, oh, I love this, I'm definitely a fan? Or is that a different thing you can shout out? And Nita, we'll come to you first. Why not?
Okay. Yes, actually, I love this question. It's one of my favorite questions. I actually go back to the original series, Star Trek, the original series. I'm dating myself. Yes, that's okay. And I remember when I watched it in the I believe mid 70s. They were already on what we used to call rerun, which is repeats. And my brother, who was 10 years older than me, he, of course, had control of the TV. He put on Star Trek, and it was Trouble with Tribbles.
Oh, no.
And I saw this and I was completely fascinated by Star Trek. I loved the story. I was like 5 years old, okay? And I was loving it. I saw Uhura and said, oh my goodness, she looks like some of my cousins. She's beautiful. And of course, Captain Kirk. You gotta love him. And I love the Tribbles. I thought they were hilarious. Because I'm 5, right? That's Tribbles. I thought they were great. And I madly fell in love with the Klingons from that point on. I thought they were the greatest villains, because at that time they weren't our allies, they were our villains. So I thought they were the greatest bad guys, right? And I just absolutely loved it and had to watch more. And I don't know that at 5 years old I truly grasped what Star Trek was doing at the time, and all of the things that they were trying to accomplish, worldviews that they were really touching on. But it definitely influenced me. And as you get older and you rewatch things, you start to realize the impact that it has. And yeah, that I love Trouble with Tribbles. I love them both from the original and
DS9's version.
the DS9's version, Trials and Tribulations. I love Klingons, always have, and I love the fact that now they are allies, right? So the Federation's allies, so that's fantastic. But that is my first image of Star Trek in my life. That first experience with Star Trek.
Oh, that's a cool story. That's cool to be able to pinpoint it like that. And Justin, what about you? Same question.
Yeah, no, I mean, it actually would be, the next generation, either like my parents having episodes like Best of Both Worlds and Cause and Effect on VHS, as well as just watching reruns like on our TV, which I feel like I'm maybe a bit of a generational contrast here then, because I was born in 95, which was the year after the show went off the air, and I was maybe like 5 or 6 years old. So actually it's kind of fitting that we talk about this, because Nemesis was the first Star Trek movie I ever saw in theaters.
Really? Oh wow, okay.
Excellent.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah,
No.
I mean, we can get into it. I was 7, and I was just like, hey, I mean, I think, that movie needed all the ticket sales it could get. So,
Yeah. Weirdly enough, the first Trek movie I saw in cinemas was Insurrection, just because I never really went that much when I was younger. So,
The first movie I saw of Star Trek in the cinema was Star Trek Wrath of Khan.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeesh.
Yeah. I love Wrath of Khan. It's, think the fact that he got an entire movie based on one episode, that's a huge influence that you had to have as a character.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
So yeah, that was, I
Definitely.
mean, again, I go way back. So yeah,
Fair enough.
I'm okay with that. I'm totally okay with that. I think I love Justin's story because it's kind of similar to mine. When
Yeah.
I saw Trouble with Tribbles, Star Trek was already on reruns. It was not playing anymore.
Of course, yeah.
Just like Justin's, he started with Next Generation. His wasn't playing anymore. But it's just to show the impact that it has, that it makes you want to go back and rewatch.
I think a lot of people found, certainly the original series, because of syndication, when it was just airing round the clock, basically.
Exactly. At that time,
around
that
the
was
year.
the only Star Trek we had.
Yeah. of
It's
course.
not like we are in the golden age of Star Trek, where we have so many different series and movies that we can pick from. At that time, we only had that series.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was it.
And,
No movies, no nothing.
absolutely. I know, yeah. So, that
definitely.
kind of might tie into the next question, but I'm going to come to you first for this one, Justin. So apologies if you have
No
had some
worries.
time to think. So the next question would just be, if you had to pick 3 episodes or movies to show somebody that you think represents the very best of the franchise, what would they be?
I'm actually very glad you asked me this question, because I'm really doing this right now with a friend of mine, where
Oh, cool.
we have a I didn't want to plug it because it hasn't been like officially released, and it's not, but we are kind of doing a podcast where we watch things for the first time and
nice.
or show each other things. Last season we did Lord of the Rings. Neither of us had seen it, and now we have. And this season I'm showing my friend Eliza at first it was just going to be like a broader Star Trek season, but then I realized, I can stretch this out a bit by doing different franchises and series, like, on each season. So it ended up becoming a Next Generation season. But the first thing I showed her was City on the Edge of Forever.
Oh, of course.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
Yeah, exactly. Which I was just like, I thought that was great. And then I think the last thing I showed her, which I think has really started to sell her on it, is Best of Both Worlds 1 and 2.
Ooh, interesting. Okay.
And maybe the third, purely for both some new Trek and purely because it's my favorite episode of all time, is Subspace Rhapsody.
Yeah, I can believe that. Especially if somebody's a fan of musicals, that's a good way to stealth get them involved, I think, in Star Trek now, isn't it? So cool.
Exactly.
Awesome. So, Nita, what about you? You've mentioned a few episodes and things already. So, would they be in your
Yes,
three?
I definitely for as far as the episodes, I love Trouble with Tribble because I think it's just so much fun to watch.
Another great choice. Yeah.
Yeah, and I love Best of Both Worlds. I think that that's a very intense. I think that once the Best of Both Worlds happen, and I love all of TNG, but I think it got better after that. The and I think that you see the intensity of action, you see what happens to Captain Picard, the drama, and then what happens to the crew when you shake it up. And I think it also showcases Deanna in a better light, really solidify her as not just a member of the pretty girl on the bridge, but as a member of the crew. And I think that that was important for the show. In another episode that I think it's really, really, uh, believe it or not, I think the first episode of Deep Space Nine
The
really
Emissary, the pilot.
yes, the emissary, the pilot, it really bridges together TNG and this new series that was coming on, Deep Space Nine. And it started to showcase more um more representation. Of course, Discovery is by far the most that gives you the most representation of different peoples and lifestyles, and just the representation is amazing
Oh, yeah.
it's
Which
uncanny.
pisses off all the right people, which is quite
Exactly. As far as the movies, definitely my favorite is going to always be classic Star Trek, Wrath of Khan. Believe it or not, I like Star Trek Nemesis.
That's
I
okay.
always
I kind of
have.
wanted to have a range of views on this, so I mean, I apologies if you think we're being
Yeah.
just entirely
No,
dismissive to
no,
everyone
not at
listening.
all.
but-
Not at all. I understand why a lot of people may have, concerns, but I do like it. I really like this movie. And I actually like Star Trek First Contact. It's
First
not
Contact's
as
great.
yeah, that was a really good movie. So I think those three are on my top list. I do enjoy most of the movies that I've watched. I like them all. I like the new version, the Kelvin timeline, Wrath of Khan version. I do enjoy that, but those three are like, I think, the prominent ones that I do enjoy.
Awesome. So I have a couple of questions, but first of all, out of those two is the big one. So Nita, I'm going to come to you first. What is your favorite out of all of the Trek series?
Well, Deep Space Nine is my favorite. I
So many
think
people say that.
Deep Space Nine is my favorite. I saw so much of myself and so much representation of myself in this that I felt so connected. And it really gave you a different understanding. I didn't care for it at first because, like most people, I said they're not going anywhere. Star Trek is about space, about getting on a ship and going, but it's not. It's more than that. And this gave you that opportunity to see that. The different side of, because they always talked about space stations, and they went on space stations, and they did go to planets. So there was more to being in Starfleet than flying on a ship. We just didn't see it, and I think that this gave us that opportunity. And everyone came there. Voyager came there. Enterprise came there. If you had to stop there. It was a pivotal point in space. They were guarding this entrance to, the Gamma Quadrant. There was, emissaries, and there was religion, which was never before represented in Star Trek. You had all these different cultures. We got to understand the Ferengi more. We got to see new alien species that, we had kind of seen a little bit here and there, but not really understand them. And I really thought that was great. And I really love the fact that they brought the Romulans in a lot. I mean, the Romulans were on Deep Space Nine so much. I really like that. We need more Romulans.
We'll get to that, I'm sure. But and Justin, you've had some time to think about it. So the big question: what's your favorite series?
Yeah, I would honestly personally say just Next Generations because it was my first, and so I think by that extension, established for me personally what my understanding of Trek is. Although I will say Strange New Worlds is becoming a close second because I don't know, just because because they're both very similar but also distinct. Because I just love I like with Strange New Worlds. I love it as has the episodic storytelling but serialized character development. Where it's you get that quick dopamine hit of finishing an episode, but also feel like you are going on a journey with these characters. But I'm sure Reason TNG is also my favorite. Those probably, it's probably nostalgia is probably a huge part of it, because I'll be entirely honest, I didn't for some reason I grew up in a primarily TNG household where I don't think I was introduced to Captain Kirk through Generations.
All right. Okay.
Oh, okay. That's cool.
Yeah. So I didn't know what was going on when I first saw that movie when I was 6 or 7. My parents showed me where I was just who is this new person and all that. And so I have a very skewed idea or reception of especially with Kirk's death. As a kid, I was of course he's not Picard. Of course the other guy has to die. But now I'm okay.
That's a weird perspective, but yeah, definitely I get it. You're making me feel old.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't mean to
You are old, dude.
Shush, you're older.
That's why I can say that with impunity.
I'm probably the oldest person in this group.
I think DK is kind of pleased to have somebody on who's maybe a little older than him. Yeah. Awesome. So the very last question is, obviously we're looking at Romulan-themed stories.
Yes.
So coming to each of you, and again, I'll come to you, Justin, we'll alternate it a little bit. Do you have any particular Romulan storylines, characters, arcs that you would like to shout out as being among the best?
I will say, for some reason, when you say Romulan episode, maybe if it's not Romulan focused, I'd say something always jumps out to me personally is Data's Day.
Okay. Yeah, they did have a plot in that, for sure. That's an interesting one to mention, because it's you wouldn't think of it, but yeah, absolutely. True. Yeah. Cool. I like that, because that's not one that we would ever have mentioned before. So, yeah, definitely a good one to put on the books. And what about you, Nita?
One of my favorite Star Trek Deep Space Nine episode on the Pale Moonlight, when he talks about getting the Romulans into the war and the trickery that he had to go through, and the guy dying, and I love the passion the Romulan had. This is a fake. I'm oh my god, yes, this is a fake.
Launched 1,000 memes.
Oh man, I absolutely love it, and I love that episode because it was Romulan centered, but you didn't really get a lot of Romulans, and I love the secrecy of the Romulans, but I think that we need to get the Romulans out and exposed more, but yeah, I love that episode because bringing them into the war really. And that desperate need to bring them into the war gave us an understanding that even though they weren't our allies of the Federation, right, they were necessary.
Yeah. We're talking about that episode in a few weeks, so I'm going to keep my thoughts on that one under wraps until then. But yeah, I know that DK is not necessarily a fan of the secretive Romulans part that you were talking about, but we've talked about that ad nauseum, I think, over the last few episodes.
Oh, yeah, we do need to get them out the closet and stop being so secretive.
Which
they do.
I feel like I should actually mention that the first episode of the original series I ever saw was Balance of Terror.
Oh, well, that's brilliant. That's a great
episode. That's a great one to start with.
Yep.
Yeah, definitely. I remember, we had, you remember, when it came in, each episode came, in an individual DVD, and I have a very vivid memory. I had no context.
DVD. I remember when my mum had 2 episodes on a VHS tape that we watched.
I remember having TNG on VHS as well.
Oh, I remember before internet existed. Okay, so all of you just let that go. Embrace it and love it all.
Yeah, because also for what it's worth, my dad actually watched the original series as it was airing when he was
Yeah, I think my mum did, and the first time it aired in the UK, which was actually a few years after the US, but yeah. Cool. Well, that's I think dealt with a few of the Trek questions and got that out of the way. So I'm going to move us on to bits and pieces before the review, but the main part of the review. And if you've been listening to us for our Romulan series on the Trek podcast, you know that I'm taking it upon myself, copied completely. Homaging from the Delta Flyers podcast. I'm deciding to do a limerick and a haiku to try and describe the episode, or in this case, movie that we're talking about. I keep one for the end and one to read out just now before we jump into anything else. And I'm going to go around democratically and ask which would you like to hear first, my haiku or my limerick? DK, I'll ask you first.
I'm going to go with haiku. We've got to save the limerick for the end, surely. We need something to lift our spirits.
Fair enough. Justin, what do you want to hear first?
I don't know, like, because of my ancestry and the fact that I live in Massachusetts, I feel like I'm obliged to say limerick.
Okay. So you're going to be the decider then, Nita. What do you want to hear?
I'll go with limerick.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm a Brooklyn girl. I'm thinking limerick might be right up my alley.
Yeah, Boston, Brooklyn represents.
Yeah.
Awesome. I tried my best, but apologies if this isn't 100% fantastic. And again, it may show my bias about the film, but if you like it, fair play to you. And it's also a little bit of a sympathetic shout out to Michael Dawn amongst this. So my limerick is as follows. Picard gets summoned by Shinzon. There's no plot for our resident Klingon. Tom Hardy serves ham. Data's out with a bang, but there's little to hang anything on.
Oh.
No.
Oh boy.
So yeah,
Oh my.
came up with that by myself. I'm quite proud of that one. So yeah, I think you've gotten painfully quiet after that.
Yeah.
I think he's emotionally scarred.
It was actually more entertaining than the movie.
Oh no! Oh, me and you are gonna have to take this out in the schoolyard.
Oh yeah, you can get all the hateful comments calling you dismissive and unworthy to hear opinions and things. Yeah,
You say that, but when it comes to the conclusion, I bet one of us has a more glowing review.
We'll see. I tried to be as kind as I could. I wanted to look at something because nothing I think is like completely irredeemable without anything. So I have got plus points in here. So
not to cause people to take a swig, but there are some episodes that are irredeemable in Star Trek.
Oh god! If you shout that episode out one
That's
more
true. That's true.
Ding ding.
Code of honor.
Did you say Code of Honor? That was
DK has an ongoing vendetta against the Voyager episode, The Fight. That's what he was referring to.
Oh,
I'm with him with that one. That
that makes sense too. I mean, is it really is it worse than Threshold though?
Threshold's got that Mystery Science Theater vibe to it, so I can take that. Whereas
I can take that too. Mm-hmm.
The Fight is just I just want to gouge my eyes out.
Yeah, I was not a fan of The Fight.
No.
Well, DK has found an ally and an enemy.
That's right. I'm sort of like a Romulan.
Sneaky.
I can be your friend or I can be your enemy.
Nice.
Cool. So, speaking of DK, we are going to do, first of all, before we jump into the episode, a little bit of behind-the-scenes information, because we always do. Myself and DK have gathered some bits of information, but I've given him some to read out and me some others within the review. And first of all, he is handling the behind-the-scenes section, as he often does on our Silver Screen podcast. So, without any more rambling from me, DK, it's over to you.
Yeah, no worries. Well, obviously, as we know, the film received generally negative reviews, with publications considering it to be the worst in the franchise. The film itself was a box office failure, earning $67 million worldwide against a $60 million budget. Plans for a final film featuring the Next Generation cast were scrapped because of this, and the film series was rebooted instead with Star Trek in 2009, which was a box office success. The television series Star Trek Picard, a continuation of The Next Generation, and Nemesis set 2 decades after the latter at the end of the 24th century, premiered in 2020, obviously. It also wasn't very well loved among the cast, with LeVar Burton and Marina Sirtis speaking unflatteringly of Baird. They were criticising him for not watching any episodes of The Next Generation. Frakes said that if he himself had directed Nemesis, he would have made the film less villain-centric and given more screen time to the regular Next Generation cast. Patrick Stewart later described Nemesis as a pretty weak finale for the Next Generation. It received mixed to negative reviews from critics. Review aggregation website Rotten Tomatoes gave the film a critic rating of 38% based on 170 reviews. This was the second lowest rating behind Trek V: The Final Frontier. On Metacritic, it has a score of 51%. 51? That's quite high. Based on reviews from 29 critics, indicating mixed or average reviews. Now, midway during shooting, the captain's chair from the bridge set disappeared, apparently stolen. While the film crew scrambled to find a way to work around the problem, the Star Trek Enterprise cast and crew shooting in the sound stages next door, they decided to have a little fun at their franchise mate's expense. Scott Bakula visited Sir Patrick Stewart's trailer to present him with a makeshift wooden replacement chair with the letters KAPTIN painted on it.
I love that story. I had to include that because I can just picture like Scott Bakula hilariously like hee Sir Patrick, here's your new chair.
I didn't know that. Oh wow.
Yeah. Oh man, if only somebody had filmed that. Again, probably more entertaining than parts of the movie.
Exactly.
Oh yeah.
I'll stop being mean. So yeah, as I say, if you are new to us on either of our podcasts, the way that we break our reviews down, just for the purposes of my note, is to have sections like writing/plot, then acting, directing, VFX and production design, sound and music, and then we move on to our kind of favorite things, our conclusions, etc. at the end. But if the conversation flows a different way, we just go with it. It's not strictly, a rigid format. It's more just to keep my notes in check, I suppose, more than anything. So I'm going to kick us off by asking about the writing and the plot and talking a little bit about that. And the first thing we probably have to talk about is the Shinzon Picard clone plot idea. So who wants to open us up on that? Do we have any thoughts about that one?
That was a little bit painful, but I think that they needed a villain. They needed to create a villain. They needed to create drama, right? Because the movie starts out with this happy event, which was long coming. Those two needed to be married already, and he needed to take the captain's chair. But so it starts up with this happy event, but in order to create that suspense and that drama, the action that I think that the movie was looking for, they needed something. I think that the clone thing, I had a hard time buying it because there aren't enough interactions with Federation and the Romulans for them to have had time to steal his DNA.
The funny part is that when they try to explain that, I think it's Dr. Crusher says something like, they may have cloned him from one of your hair follicles. And I don't really want Picard to just turn around and be like, what hair?
Exactly.
just giving her the side eye and say, are you taking the piss, Beverly?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of the favorite words to use in any sci-fi film, television show story is the word somehow.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's either like Tata.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
Yeah, somehow Palpatine returned. The temporal wake somehow protected us from the changes in the timeline. Somehow the Romulans got your it's the favorite word of any.
Somehow is the equivalent to we don't really know, so we making some stuff up.
Yes.
It's the equivalent to Doctor Who saying "I'll explain later," basically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He never does.
Yeah. Cool.
Yes.
It seemed like a throwaway thing, and I was like, well, they've had contact with enough Romulans that they might have, I don't know, come across a loose hair or something. I guess, I don't know. Or I don't know, maybe the Starfleet insists on you having DNA on file and they hack the record or something, I guess. I can handle by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm of the opinion camp person. Like, it doesn't, for me, it's not so much how it happened. It's more like what the characters do after it does and their response. Because that's what we get to see. That's what the movie should focus around, and I know a lot of people have said, and I understand that how tired this movie feels because we have had clones before. We had Thomas Riker, we had the evil Kirk and the enemy within. So it's not exactly new or fresh for Trek, which is ironic considering this was meant to be a breath of fresh air, given the talent that they brought in. I mean, it still blows my mind that the script was written by the same dude who gave us Gladiator, The Aviator, and Skyfall.
That was also co-written by Brent Spiner, to be fair. So.
Yeah, well, I think he got that story credit because he's like, I want Data to die, and that was basically just like as far as did he actually write any of the dialogue or the lines?
I'm pretty sure he wrote most of the Data B4 plotline. I'm blaming him for it anyway. So.
Considering there was there wasn't much going into it with the number of writers, it feels very much at times like it's written by a committee.
Right? Yeah, it does.
There's
Ironically enough, John Logan is meant to be like a really big Star Trek fan because there's so many things in here that seem antithetical to Star Trek as an idea. Again, I don't want to get too far into it ahead of time, but like, I don't know, just jumping into things that don't feel like Star Trek and seeming like you're fighting against the franchise.
To me, it just feels like there's way too much going on. It's almost like they're throwing everything at the wall and seeing what sticks. You've got your Khan type character, you've got a sort of Genesis device type of MacGuffin, another Data brother, you've got a retread of certain Next Generation episodes, you've got death of characters, Wrath of Khan. Oh, look, here's, Shinzon feeling rough, you can tell by his doubling over. Everything just seems to be happening, or everything at once. It doesn't come across. I mean, don't get me wrong, I kind of like the clone subplot, but in this, to me anyway, it feels like kind of a lazy version of trying to get an emotional connection from viewers by retconning a kind of Khan-type character into this. I mean, Khan earned his place, and for want of a better term, the other villains in the movies kind of earned their place. This kind of just feels like a shameful retcon for the sake of having an antagonist.
It feels like a bit of a shortcut, you're right about that, and because you have to have that connection to Picard, which obviously, like you say, in the previous movies, you had that. In here, it really does just feel like the only connection is it's a clone of you. Oh, and by the way, he's also made by the Romulans and connected to the Remans and stuff. Why? Just cause script says so. It just feels like. And for me, the worst part about it is like the villain motivation is just so lazy, because it seems like it's going to start off quite interesting with like, we're here to try and make peace. It's what we're gonna do, and there's a little bit of intrigue there. And then just out of nowhere, about halfway through, he's just like, nah, forget it. We're just going to blow up Earth. Again, no reason, but why not?
I think the intrigue, any kind of intrigue, it seems very clunky on the part of the director, because there are scenes where if just the scenes were kind of swapped over, it would work a lot better, so that when Shinzon does inevitably, do his heel turn, I mean, you're going to see it coming no matter what, but at least it would kind of wrong foot the audience a little more had you got these scenes swapped over instead of, I don't know, it almost feels like Shinzon's there twirling his moustache right from the start.
It's true. And I like Shinzon, the idea, the concept, like, but I feel like they could have written him a bit better, like less creepy. Like, he was a creeper. That whole thing with "let me touch your hair." No, who does that? Who goes around just going to strange women you don't know? Let me touch your hair. Are you trying to get your hand cut off? Like, he was a creeper.
This was one thing I wanted to. One thing I wanted to mention is that we had a guest on at one point, and I do apologize to whoever it was because I've forgotten to credit them. But we had a guest on that was like, I rewrote Star Trek Nemesis, and it would be so much more interesting instead of using Shinzon and B4. You can kind of keep the same exact plot, but use Lore and use Thomas Riker. And that makes the kind of being obsessed with Deanna thing also make a heck of a lot more sense.
Absolutely. It would have made way more sense.
Yeah, I'm amazed because you think about that, literally just changing who the characters are, just like completely puts it. Because I was going to say, because Wrath of Khan does have a lot of moving parts to it as well. It's got, Kirk having, been an admiral and growing older, and you've got Genesis and you've got Khan, but because it's all refined and held together by this theme and with the character development, it works. Whereas Nemesis, everything is a little bit more disconnected, so that's why it doesn't work as well, because it doesn't because the plot points and the story beats don't play off of each other the way they do in Wrath of Khan.
They could have kept the whole concept of a clone and even Shinzon, but there were just certain things about his character they could have just edited that out and not written that particular part of him, because it really didn't make sense.
I mean, to be fair to the movie and to a point that DK was, I think, making, there are individual scenes that are not, not the overall whole, but individual parts of it that I think really do work. And a lot of the time, if it's Patrick Stewart and Tom Hardy doing scenes together, for the most part, they're actually really good and interesting and intriguing, and they're playing off each other well. Until, of course, it gets ridiculous and Tom Hardy's face is all green and melty, and he starts overacting and pulling himself off.
Tom Hardy did a really good job of playing a part because he's kind of playing a part of a character that already exists, that still exists. He's in front of the character that exists, yet can't really play him the way we know Picard, because his life experience was different. So it has created this whole new different type of Picard, so to speak. And I think he did a good job. And I can kind of also see Picard sort of looking like him when he was younger. Like, I think visually they did a good job.
Sorry, I wasn't laughing at you. It was just DK mentioned earlier the idea that like Picard's hair fell out twice.
Yeah. When he shows her the photo and he says, "Remember him?" and like you're saying, he says, "You should say not unless your hair fell out twice." No.
Yes, that's exactly it. Yeah?
I was saying like she should have responded, wow, this would have had so much more impact if we'd seen Tom Hardy in picture form before he was revealed. Like they reveal him through the lights on the Romulan ship at the start, and we're all meant to be like, oh, gasp, it's Picard, and we have no connections, and it's clearly a different actor. If they'd shown the photo first and been like, oh, remember me when I was younger, then we'd met Tom Hardy. Then we could have been like, oh, gasp, it's young Picard.
Yes, but, I didn't get the whole gasping in the beginning and why they were all looking creeped out until they speak to Beverly, because I was like, I don't understand because you don't have a visual image of Picard as younger. So that I 100% agree with that. They should have had him reminiscing in his room or something. I don't know.
For one thing, I was just going to say, it's storytelling 101. Yeah, set up, payoff, where if you set up showing Picard what he looked like when he was younger, then that is paid off when you see, oh, not only is young Picard, quote unquote, in this movie, but he's evil or something like that, which like that would make it pay off way more, which it's very clear also to me that, no pun intended, John Logan and Stuart Baird were not on the same page.
Yeah.
Definitely, because it does feel, like I said, just jarringly different. But I also, just as a final point from me, as I say, what I was referring to with the motivation is, it just seems like they set up a really interesting motivational backstory, but it all basically involves how terribly he was treated, Shinzon, by the Romulans. And yet, out of nowhere, like I said, this heel turn happens, and it's just like, well, I've taken over Romulus and befriended the Romulans, so I'm going to go and destroy Earth. And you're just like, but they did nothing to you, dude. I mean, there's no reason for this other than we need a final act threat to the Earth. You know what I mean? It's like, it bugs me.
Now, let me ask you guys a question. Do you think they should have addressed that whole, there's a Romulan raised by Reman now in charge of the Romulan Senate? Like, there's no Romulan in charge of Romulans? They never really truly addressed that. And that kind of felt like,
They did have a Romulan in charge. It was Jim from Neighbours, but he got melted by Toleron radiation.
He was melted, so he don't count. I mean, really.
You would have thought there would have been some...
Wicked Witch, you don't
count. You would have thought there'd been some blowback to this kid.
Apparently
this
you can
clone
just assassinate
kid
the entire Senate and then stomp in and be like, now I'm in charge.
And all right. Does the Federation, I don't know, take issue with that? You think Picard as a diplomat be like, I think we need to first discuss how you became leader. I mean, rumors are that they all got melted, so what's happening? Like, did they not know about it? Is it that secretive?
They need the whole Thaleron radiation MacGuffin because you needed a super weapon, the equivalent of, as DK said, of like the Genesis device or something that you could have Data sacrifice himself to stop, and that's the ultimate big threat. And it's just, it's just lazy, really, because it just feels like, how did he get this weapon? And there's a lot of stuff like that, like when they mention, the scimitar, it's a massive, hugely powerful cloak ship that he just constructed behind the Romulans' back.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that is like, it's almost like a kid in the playground designing ships. We get it, it's big and tough, it's got all these phaser banks, it's got 22 photon torpedo bays. I was expecting them to go, it's also got an EMP generator, custom pie thrower, and, maybe a big boot that comes out the bottom Looney Tunes Acme style and kicks other ships across the galaxy. It just kind of screams desperation, like a lot of this script to me.
I'm going to defend it because I quite like the design of the scimitar. And I will say it's at least more restrained than Picard Season 3 when they find that ship and it's like, it's got every weapon known to man and a few we've never heard of.
Yeah. Exactly. I'm with you, Michael.
Yeah.
That that was a bit much in Picard. Yeah, and when you are dealing with a weapon that's considered a weapon of mass destruction, so to speak, you kind of expect it to kind of come with this ominous big kind of ship, right? So
Yeah.
that made sense. But they felt like they didn't overdo it, which was good. Like one big giant weapon was enough.
Yeah, my issue is more, like I said, the idea that they're so under the Romulans' thumb, they've been horribly abused, they're working 24/7 in the mines, but he's able to create this massive, hugely overpowered ship and nobody noticed.
Exactly. Where did they? How did they do this? Like,
Yeah, I just say that is one thing I do credit where it is due about this movie. One thing I do like is that when we get the Battle of the Basin Rift, is that seeing basically the Enterprise just take like pummel after pummel, and they're throwing everything, all the usual fire phasers and torpedoes, and it just like does nothing. And just so
I love that too.
Yeah, exactly. And so that basically Picard is left with no option but a collision course, which I don't think it's been threatened with a bunch of times in Star Trek, but usually either it doesn't have to happen or it doesn't hold, like in Year of Hell on Voyager. So that I actually do like, and is something that works in this movie. But
yes, agreed.
I definitely agree with you on that.
I think the fact that the Enterprise got just beat up, I thought it was excellent because this thing was massive.
Yeah, but not to be like really nitpicky and nerdy and just negative all the time. But my issue with that again is that it reeks of just we're about to rendezvous with the fleet. Oh no, we've been ambushed because we can't afford an entire fleet.
Yeah,
shush. We're fighting them one-on-one. Why can the fleet not come here? Shh. Our CGI budget's been blown. We've got the ships ramming each other. That's all we can afford.
Oh yeah, I guess it makes you think of. I remember I think it was YouTuber. I think his name is Steve Shives, who called this movie Insurrection without the jokes.
Yeah, pretty much.
Because it's the same thing when the Enterprise with Riker and they're trying to contact Starfleet about the Sona and the Baku, where it's the same thing. It's a battle in a rift where they can't contact Starfleet, and
exactly.
Except
with all the technology in the world, and communications tend to fail rapidly, like all the time.
It's like a cell phone in a horror movie.
Yes.
Yeah. And I did write as well, to your point, DK, that again it's just Wrath of Khan. Just call the Basin Rift the Mutara Nebula. It's exactly the same battle. There's a convenient spatial anomaly that's going to block our sensors and communication. And we've kind of started to touch on it a little bit, but I kind of have to mention, and again, we've talked about this on a previous episode under the hit or miss section, DK, but what does everybody think about the Nosferatu, the vampire species that we finally meet, and for some reason they look like monsters? Justin, I'll come to you first on this, because DK and I have mentioned this a previous point.
Yeah, it's very weird. I'm personally conflicted because they, I mean, like I said, it's very. I mean, I understand what they're going for because they are kind of like vampires because they're in the dark all the time, but they also look way creepier than your average Star Trek alien. But also the fact, they were lucky enough to land Rob Perlman for this, who was I think I think that in and of itself is also an up for this, is that they managed to get Rob Perlman in a Star Trek movie. That's
but they wasted him.
Yeah, I know. I mean, better than nothing, but but still, I'm like a lot of this movie personally, it's kind of like I'm almost like at net zero, because it seems like for every thing there is to admire about it, there's one thing that it's like, oh, why? Because again, it seems like overly creepy to and then, which I understand they're meant to be the bad guys, but it seems like it belongs in a Guillermo del Toro movie instead.
Agreed. Yeah, I think they went overboard with the Reman look. They did it. I get that they wanted to make them look alien-like, right? And Star Trek is not without its aliens. You've got Bolians and Klingons and Romulans and Vulcans, but these people are in a way related to Romulans, sort of, right? Because they've been with them for a long time. There's got to be a little colonization going on. So that DNA had to be a little bit mixed in there. So I'm thinking, why so vampirically looking? Are you trying to... What are you saying? Because they were forced to live on the dark side of the moon. They were forced to work the mines. So I can understand making them look rough, but the vampire kind of creepiness of them, I think it was really just meant to make them more ominous.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, I
Yeah.
don't buy for
I
one
don't-
second that
yeah.
the Romulans could mutate into that severely just because
Yeah,
they're in the
no.
dark. It's just
Exactly. I
and,
don't think that's how evolution works.
no, it's really not. And somebody mentioned, I think, one of our guests when we talked about it on the hit or miss section earlier, they said that it kills all tension because in the film you've kind of got Romulans and the intrigue and everything, and the second the Remans appear on screen, you're in no doubt who the villain is because they look like monsters.
Yes.
So as soon as you see them, you're like, well, they're the villains, clearly.
Yes.
Yeah, it's
yeah.
completely, it's telling the audience about the bomb under the table, basically.
Exactly. Agreed.
But there's no real delving into it. Yes, they touch upon the slavery on Remus and things like that. But if they had played them more Romulan rather than just the vampiric monsters, you could have had this whole dynamic that said, we're wanting to free the Romulan Empire, as it were. We're wanting them to not be as so secretive, as so distrusting. We want this actual peace, and you would believe them a hell of a lot more than what's being thrown at you.
That's what I mean. It could have been a lot more interesting because the audience would be left in doubt about, like, well, who are the real bad guys here? Is it the Remans or is it the Romulans that have mistreated them? But that was another note that I made, was like the movie goes to pains to point out how the Romulans definitely did mistreat the Remans. There's no doubt about that. They were treated like crap. They were responsible for like Shinzon's abuse and breaking his jaw and whatever else. Then at the end of the movie, it's kind of like, but the Romulans are our friends. The Remans clearly deserved it. And it's just kind of
Exactly.
like, what? What are we doing?
Yeah, it's like, well, yeah, that's so much like, it's not a good look on the movie's part when I personally, as a viewer, have to actively remind myself that Romulans and Remans are kind of meant to be like almost like two sides of the same coin, almost. Whereas, or maybe not, you know what I mean, like, or like a reflection, or like different. But like instead, they look like they're from two different planets. Completely.
And I think that they kind of the fact that they do this overshadows the fact that they were victims of slavery.
Yeah.
The real, I mean, so the question is, who truly is the bad guy? Yes, they're bad. They're doing something bad. But who is making it so that they're that angry? Had they not been slaves, would they be that kind of a people? And because slavery leaves so many different kinds of emotions, and revenge and anger is one of them. You can't really blame someone who's been enslaved, so want to slice your neck open.
This is what I mean about the scene. Like, I really love the scene because of the kind of the optimistic Trekkie within me. I do kind of love it when Donatra hails and she's like, "You've made a friend in the Romulan Empire, the first of many." But
Yes,
really,
agreed.
Picard's response should have been, "I'm very grateful, but we really need to talk about how you treat the Remans before we can make peace."
Yeah.
It is all very clunky. It is like they've just tried to put as much into the script as possible, and none of it kind of works. I mean, even to the point where I'm digressing now. The whole telepathic assault on Deanna.
I was going to talk about that and keep it contained to one piece.
I mean, to the point where they name check the actual episode that they're ripping off.
Yeah, exactly.
Violations.
Violations, yes.
Oh yeah, it's like and that's another intrinsic problem with this. Like I said, not just how tired it is, but that the movie raises a million questions, but isn't willing to offer any answers to any of them. Like,
no.
Yeah.
I find
it really disturbing that Picard is like, "Can you endure more?" No,
I was just going to say that it's the worst part of the movie. I absolutely hate that Troi is like, I've been violated. I'm going to withdraw from duty because I'm a liability. And Picard's like, "Oh no, negative. If you could endure more rape, we kind of need you to." Because
that's so out of character for him.
That is completely out of character. I agree with the fact that had to be part of it in order to basically save them. Was very weird.
There would have been other ways of plotting,
Absolutely.
like a failsafe to try and find that Romulan ship without including that plot line. It was
Yeah.
just completely
And they could
unnecessary.
have used the telepathy because, as a beta said, they could have said, "I sense a level of telepathy in the Remans,"
Yeah.
and they could have had this discussing. Yeah, well, they're kind of related to the Romulans, who are kind of related to the Vulcans, and she could have been like, "I think I can connect with them." Like, there could have been 100 different ways. Why did you have to essay her for real? Really? Like,
Yeah.
was
That's the
that
thing
really
that bugged me
necessary to
is
degrade her that way?
there's got to be better plot lines to give Marina and Deanna
Yeah,
for something to do, and to
absolutely.
fall back on the old trope of like the only way we can give women any urgency is to have them overcome this rape narrative is just
Exactly.
like I
Yeah.
don't expect that in Star
Exactly.
Trek. It's
Yeah,
so
it's a
terrible.
very double-edged sword, because on the one hand, this is the most that Troi has ever had to do in
Mhm.
any of the movies, but also, and there is a weird, like, and again, like, it could have been done so much better, but there is a somewhat of a, for want of a better term, a payoff in the fact that she basically flips the switch on, or flips the narrative by doing it back and getting it up. But again, like, and that in and of itself, like, everything around it is horrible. It's a good idea in concept, but the way they did it was just like the worst way you could have had that set
Yeah.
up.
Yeah, absolutely agreed.
And they also, I mean, they double down on them completely mucking it up with this plot. They also use it to give the man more urgency because the person ultimately responsible for attacking her, the Viceroy, Riker gets to kill him because, of course, you have to have the heroic man get the urgency to do it. And like, it's like, oh, come on, guys, you're messing up on every possible level. Sure, but it goes to show how they were treating, like, the writer and director were kind of treating it like generic action movie tropes.
Action. We're the Silver Screen Podcast. Hey there, film buffs. I'm DK, your cult movie uber geek, and I'm here with my co-host, Mike Wilson.
That's right, folks. We're your guides through the world of cinema, from beloved classics to the hottest films in the zeitgeist. On the Silver Screen Podcast, we dive deep into film culture. Join us as we review movies with honesty and respect, offering our unique take on what makes them tick.
And don't forget our Silver Screen Cult Classics episodes. We'll take you on a journey through the hidden gems, the cult films that deserve more love, and the stories behind them. We've a blast welcoming all manner of movie-loving guests for lively discussion and to share our love of films. Their passion and knowledge make every episode a cinematic adventure.
Plus, we'll give you our own scores straight from the heart out of 5 stars. You'll hear our honest verdicts no matter how much we geek out about a film. And remember what Arnie said, we'll be back. So don't miss a single episode of the Silver Screen Podcast.
Subscribe now to the Silver Screen Podcast YouTube channel or find us wherever you get your podcasts. Let's embark on a cinematic journey like no other. Whether you're a casual moviegoer or a true cinephile, the Silver Screen Podcast is your ticket to film magic. And cut.
Which brings me to my next point, speaking of divisive things. The buggy chase.
Oh God! Oh right! Oh yeah! Right. Why is it? Why did it look like someone rubbed Vaseline on the lens when they filmed
Yeah.
Because Stuart Baird was auditioning to direct the next Mad Max film.
Oh,
It looks like a Soundgarden video.
Yeah. It looks like so many things that it is like, I don't think this is a hot take, but it's literally the least Trek looking thing in in a single Trek movie.
Yeah, and I mean, I had an issue for a while about, like, why are we using a buggy when we've got, like, anti-gravity tech and stuff? It's very un-Star Trek, and it clearly is just, like, we need an action scene. And then I caught onto the line about they're a pre-warp civilization, and I was like, oh, okay, that's fair enough. They have to use... And then it occurred to me, no, they've got this shuttle just hovering right nearby it anyway. You know, they're shooting phasers left and right. They're picking up a Soon-type android. They've already infected this pre-warp planet. Using a buggy isn't going to help.
This movie never abides by its own logic.
Exactly, yeah. But the other
But
thing
that
about
goes to show you how the writing was done by someone who, I don't care how much he professes to be a Trekkie, really has not watched enough Trek to understand it. Because I'm with you, Ankle. The buggy, really, they could have, like, I didn't understand. I'm like, that's the kind of stuff we have now. Like, I thought they were gonna, when he said, oh yeah, you know, they're gonna go down, I thought I was gonna see something space agey. You know? Maybe the hovers low, but fly.
They pushed out an ATV.
It's an ATV. Like, how traitor trash is that? Like, I don't
Exactly.
understand.
What's even worse for me though is like, and again, it's indicative of just why do these things happen because the scripts say they do. There's no motivational reason for the inhabitants of the planet to suddenly attack them, and no motivation is given for it. And Picard, Mr. Diplomacy, takes one look at this pre-warp civilization attacking them and says, "Mr. Worf, bust out the phaser cannon." It's just like, what are we doing here? Everybody's completely out of character. Nothing makes any sense. It's just like, we need an action scene.
It is so not, Federation code for them to be doing that. Like, they should have just ran out of there, And honestly, if they would have just went down, like beamed down and quietly picked up the pieces and left, that is you not infecting the planet. But you go in there with the ATV making all that noise and ruckus.
At least give us a reason. Like, why are they chasing after them? Do they want the android? Because it was there the whole time, so they don't seem to, and they don't necessarily have any reason to think of you as an enemy. They just kind of attacked, and like I said, it's just completely ridiculous that the response to that from any Starfleet officer would be, let's pull out the big cannon on the truck and shoot at them then.
I think there was this desperate need, and I don't know how you guys feel about it, but there was this desperate need to make it an action film.
Yeah,
100%.
And there's nothing wrong with action. I love action, right?
Yeah.
But I think that when it comes to Star Trek, there has to be more science and less action. And there has to kind of be like maybe a 50-50, right? And I liked the movie. There was a lot of points to this movie that I enjoyed that they could have done so much more with, but I can definitely sit back and objectively see why this movie didn't do as well as the others.
Yeah.
And to Justin's point, and to be positive for a second, there's action in the movie that really works. Like the space battle at the end of the movie is very effective and works really well.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. And I will say, like, I'm not sure if I said this yet, but it's been a thought that's been on my mind for a while. Which for me, whenever I see this movie, I feel like I see two movies. Like, there's the movie I'm watching, and also the movie it could have been.
Agreed.
Yeah, because
I'm with you, Justin.
Yeah, exactly. Because you see all the behind the scenes, and it's all the deleted scenes, and they're all much more character focused. And I love, like, there's one where Worf, like, basically before they go to like Remus, where like Worf says to Picard something like, "Oh, like, be careful, we should have raised because the Romulans can't be trusted." But that's not in the theatrical cut. So Worf just kind of says out of hand, the Romulans fought with honor, and which I think that alone would have given, like, just those two lines would have given Worf like at least a bit of an arc in this movie, and like maybe have given a little bit more of a dimension to the Romulans, because as we know, like it's not explored in this movie, at least, and it could have been, is Worf's implicit distrust of the Romulans because they're the ones who killed his parents, and but that's not explored, like, at all, like everything else.
Worf did get to be comedy drunk at the start in the wedding. That's as much as he got to do.
Make a disparaging remark about Irving Berlin.
Exactly. Which is just saying his name, apparently.
Yes. Well, that's Worf. I did not like the Donatra and Shinzon scene.
I hate that scene.
That
passion.
What
was that?
Yeah, was she trying to come on to him? And he was like, ew, no, I'm not having that.
It's like he was attempting to be sexy, but it was just cringe. You almost saw Kenneth Williams in the background with the double entendres. It was terrible.
Oh.
Yeah. Oh, God.
Yeah. It's how deep does it go? Oh God, shut up, please. Get to the next scene.
This is where I disagree so much with people, because everyone says like Tom Hardy's not bad in this, and I'm like, I think he's terrible. No disrespect to the man, he got a lot better, and apparently he took acting lessons and was really upset with the response to this film. But like in that scene with Donatra when he's like, "Oh, Commander, one more thing. If you ever touch me again, I'll kill you." Just like,
yeah, so much so he actually filmed the same film later on under Christopher Nolan.
Oh God,
yeah. Shinzon and Bane really are just the same character.
But here's my question: was Tom Hardy bad, or was his writing that
I do blame a lot of it to the writing and direction. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I realize it's like the same problem that plagues like the Star Wars prequels, where you've got like a director, where of course George Lucas created something amazing, no doubting that, but everyone will tell you he's not great at directing actors. He's not great at writing like personable dialogue. And when you've got, the 20-something Hayden Christensen and Natalie Portman who are not going to question, Mr. Big George Lucas man when they're just up and comers, it's the same exact thing where Stuart Baird and, who not a great director, Tom Hardy, young man hoping to prove himself. So of course there's going to be a weird, awkward, like,
Agreed. Mm-hmm.
Sand, it gets everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. Like, honestly, that's all Tom Hardy was missing, was just being like, that's all they should. The only thing missing from that scene between him and Sinatra was like, oh, you call this a diplomatic solution? No, I call it aggressive negotiations.
Before we put all the blame on George Lucas, I just want to remind you again, somehow Palpatine returned.
Oh, yeah, no, I hate...
I mean, come on, that's J.J. Abrams, that's a whole other kettle of fish.
I hate you, J.J. Abrams, so much.
This movie had so many good elements, so many good little tiny storylines within it, and good ideas. You know, so I'll never ever say it was bad, but was it good? Was it on my top? There was elements that I felt were necessary, and I was excited about the movie. That I said, "Oh, okay, great! I'm glad they did this finally."
Absolutely, I don't think it's like irredeemable or fully unwatchable. And like I said, there's things that even I can admit, like the Picard and Shinzon scenes, during the ready room scenes and the hologram scene and everything, very well acted and really well done. Like I said, the space fight at the end between the Enterprise and the Scimitar is incredible. It's almost worth, especially, when I saw this on the big screen, I came out feeling mainly disappointed, but also thinking, at least I got to see that really cool space battle on the big screen, which was cool,
There are aspects of it that I really like. I mean, it's not entirely awful. It just, there's something not connecting, and I'm putting that down to Baird and the script. There's something missing. I mean, to paraphrase, the great Eric Morecambe, it is playing all the right notes, just not necessarily in the right order.
Correct.
It's a good way of putting it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it just even minor things, and I know I'm probably the only one, but that little scene where B-Force petting Spot. And then suddenly, his switch is flipped to evil and he heads to the computer. To me, there was no need for that little... You could have just shown him at the computer, not that kind of heel turn. That bugs me, that.
Yeah, but that was what I was going to bring up. The last thing about the specific writing is the B4 plot, which reeks to me of Brent Spiner wanting to write himself a Wrath of Khan Spock moment, and damn the logic, basically. Because like you said, it just feels like, why is Shinzon and the Romulans using this android, and how did they come across it conveniently, and what does this have to do with the main plot, other than the idea of, well, they both have mirror, evil doubles or whatever else, and plus it also gives you the way to bring back Data and without Katra or whatever you did for Spock, and so it all just reeks of like, what's this doing here? To me, anyway.
Exactly. Yeah, I had issues actually with B4. I did not have issues with Data dying or his death scene, but I have issues with B4.
Yeah, I'm the same, and I got emotionally affected by Data's death scene, and it was kind of like, at the time, I understood the logic. Brent Spiner, you can't keep playing an android forever if you visibly age. I want to go out, properly. But then if you're going to do it. I am, instead of being like thrilled and happy about the end scene where B4's like, oh, maybe I'm going to be, you just have this in memory. I just groaned. I was like, ugh. You've just killed him off, and like 5 minutes later, you're like, but don't worry.
That was my problem. I needed Data to have this heroic death, and he had that. Saving his captain would be exactly how Data would go. Okay, so that I thought was excellent. And it was so Data to do something like that. But then for them to bring him back.
I mean, they brought him back 3 times at this point.
Yeah, with B4 was a really bad writing. Like, don't keep his memory alive that way. Not that way. Like, that was just not. I didn't think it was necessary. To do that, because as much as I love to see him on Picard as an android, no matter how much makeup and AI and special effects you do, he looks different.
But just before I move to the acting, the next section, then just a couple of things that I did like to shout out, just to show any listeners who are like, you're dismissing the movie. I did like that, again, Data's death scene was really impactful, and one of the parts of that is that I do appreciate that they gave Geordi a moment with him, where he's the one that like opens the force field at the end, and you can kind of see in LeVar's acting that like he knows he's not coming back, and he gets that kind of unspoken send off, which is kind of beautiful in a way. So like that scene is great. And one other thing, I do really love the Vice Admiral Janeway cameo. Because I'm a huge fan of Voyager and that character, and I just love the idea that like you had to have a random admiral, and instead of casting somebody for that, it was a cool little fan thing to be like, oh, let's just use Kate Mulgrew. Why
Absolutely. Absolutely. I loved it.
I'll move us to the next section then, which is the acting, and I just have a little tiny bit of sort of behind the scenes, and then I'll kind of go around and ask us our thoughts again. So Sir Patrick Stewart wrote about this movie in his memoir, Making It So, and said, Nemesis was particularly weak. I didn't have a single exciting scene to play. I don't agree with that. And the actor who portrayed the movie's villain Shinzon was an odd, solitary young man from London. His name was Tom Hardy. Tom wouldn't engage with any of us on a social level, never said good morning, never said good night, and spent the hours he wasn't needed on set in his trailer with his girlfriend. He was by no means hostile. It was just challenging to establish any rapport with him. On the evening Tom wrapped his role, he characteristically left without ceremony or niceties, simply walking out the door. As it closed, I said quietly to Brent and Jonathan, and there goes someone I think we shall never hear of again. It gives me nothing but pleasure that Tom has proven me so wrong. I just had to add that. So,
at least he's happy for me. He's not like,
no,
shit.
He's not bitter. It's just kind of like, and like I said, Tom Hardy was going through a lot of stuff. He's mentioned like he was going through difficult like personal moments when he made this, and he was doubting his abilities as an actor and stuff. And after the response, like I said, he went back and did more acting lessons and took it really hard. So I mean, like I said, I think he's terrible in this movie, but it's the only movie of his that I can say that about him in, because every other performance I've seen him in, he's great. You know what I mean? And as DK said, when
I think personally he did the best he could with the script he got, and the direction he got. And on top of that, he was new and he wasn't really questioning, and maybe he felt intimidated with all these legacy actors that were there from this, fandom. And maybe that's why he kind of kept to himself.
As you see, I think it's also the intimidation of the fact that you're playing an established character played by like a legendary actor. So you're feeling like I'm going to be prepared to compared to Patrick Stewart. So naturally, that's just going to overwhelm you and be like, oh, geez, this is my first role and I have to immediately up my game to Shakespearean actor renowned levels. It's just, it's going to mess up anyone. Yeah, which is perhaps why they should just have used Patrick Stewart as both roles, which again would have made the connection for the audience a lot more, I think, I don't know, more realistic and more easy to believe if it was than just casting a completely different actor. I know you'd have like special effects budgets and everything, but it still might have made it more effective. Anyway, neither here nor there, I suppose. But it's just a thought, that they could have potentially given some thought to. So So, but I will say, like, I think Patrick Stewart is actually really good in the movie. I don't agree with his assessment that he had no good scenes, because, like I said, his scenes with Shinzon, I think, are really good. I mean, that scene with Crusher that TK mentioned is really good. The scenes at the wedding, he gets all of the cool little jokes and like kind of friendliness, and it's nice to see this loosened up version of Picard.
Agreed.
And, I chuckle at the kind of like, Data, shut up, I've waited 15 years to say that kind of thing. That's kind of more of that kind of banter and stuff. Or even like when he's leaving, I know it's just a kind of sexist joke and it's a bit of a trope, but like when he's leaving the bridge and says, your wife would never forgive me, you have the bridge, Mr. Troi. It is kind of funny, because these are characters with this history that are just like joshing each other, and I'm like, but that just disappears about, like you said, halfway through the movie, when it all just becomes grim, dark, and solemn, and it's counting down till everyone's dead, basically. Yeah. So I don't love it. But so, what did any of you guys think about the acting?
Spiner and Stewart, they're always worth a watch. Yeah. So I'm fine. I mean, I don't like B4 as much, but I do think that Spiner's acting as B4 is pretty good on part in scenes. I like the one where he's locked up in the end and he's saying why.
That scene breaks my heart. That's the only good B4 scene, but that is so powerful and heartbreaking.
Yeah, I like that one.
Have I done something wrong, and how long is indefinitely and whatever? It's like, oh.
Yeah, so those two definitely. And I'm going to give a special shout out to Jonathan Frakes for just puffing himself up bigger than Hindenburg when Shinzon begins talking to Deanna in their first meeting about touching her hair.
I love that part.
You can physically see him rear up.
I have such a cool fact about Jonathan Frakes that I'd put under VFX production design, but I'm going to drop it here because it's really funny, which is that Jonathan Frakes refused to shave his back for the love scene with Troi, and the hair on his back was instead digitally removed by an effects house.
Yeah, I was shocked when I learned that, and it's actually pretty good for 2002 like VFX. Like,
oh, it's better than Superman in Justice League with the stash. I'll give it that much.
I did not know that. I did not know that. So they did a good job because I didn't think that. I wouldn't have thought, oh, this looks weird, you know?
Yeah. But I mean, like you said, there's nobody really gets much else to do. The next gen cast are reliable enough, but they barely feature. And so it really is. It's Stuart and Spiner's film. Tom Hardy as a villain. Ron Perlman, as we've mentioned, who's basically wasted because we know he's capable of more than this, even in prosthetics. And like I give a shout out to Dina Meyer. I've mentioned this before, but she's an actress that I like, even though she's kind of a character actress that you probably haven't seen in a lead role. She's been in loads of other things like Starship Troopers and Saw, and Birds of Prey, the TV series, if you're me. And so I thought she was good as Donatra, but again, she didn't get nearly enough to do. And anytime it looked like she was going to get more to do, it was either a terrible scene or she was immediately just, nerfed out of the film. Like, we're going to take them on for you. Nope, never mind. We're disabled. You're on your own.
I agree. I think I would have liked to see, and that was another thing for a Romulan-based film. Not a lot of Romulan scenes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and this is something that was been on my mind the whole time about this movie is the fact that, we've, and again, something Rathacon does right that this movie doesn't do is that it doesn't focus as much as on how characters react and interact and grow and develop from the fallout of the villain's actions. It just more focuses on the actions themselves and never stops to think about, how that changes dynamics between either characters on the ship or between the Federation and the Romulans or anything like that.
Exactly, yeah. And I think somebody mentions it in the audience response if I've kept it, but again, it's one of those very convenient things that it's like the Enterprise E just happened to be the only ship close to Romulus that could go. How convenient that Picard's clone took over and it's his ship that's the only one that's nearby.
Exactly.
Very fortuitous.
Yeah.
And why were they so close to the border?
They went to find B4s. Why he was on that planet? Who knows? The plot said so.
I mean, that's another favorite. That's another favorite standby of Star Trek is always that the Enterprise is the only one in range. They use it in the motion picture. They use it in Generations. It's always the only one in range. The only one where it's how many ships we've seen. How many thanks to the Dominion War and Wolf 359. Surely there is another ship, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think personally, I give credit where it's due for all the cast, especially the main cast, for really still given what we know about behind the scenes and all of that, I wouldn't have blamed them in the slightest for phoning it in, but they all seem very professional and still really do their best to sell everything.
DK, you had a little bit, I think, about the direction before I move us completely away from this. So
I
do you want to take it away with that?
Yeah. Stuart Baird, he was brought in to direct Nemesis by executive producer and everybody's favourite human being, Rick Berman. It was Baird's third film following U.S. Marshals and executive decision. Dude, you should have just finished right there. Although he had directed a variety of second units previously, Baird did not have a background in Star Trek. He was aware of the film and TV series, but did not consider himself an expert on this. You think?
Yeah.
Did not consider himself an expert on the subject.
What?
Berman explained that Baird would bring flesh blood to the film, and that Berman had enjoyed the sense of fun and action. Oh God, I can't believe this shit as I'm reading it. The sense of fun and action that existed in Executive Decision. Baird said in a promotional interview that this resulted in a non-typical Baird film. Pretty typical to me. Anyway, saying that it was perhaps a little different from the dynamics of the previous films. He wanted to add energy to the action scenes and added some set pieces, such as the car chase. He called that scene a signature piece for the film, which turns dark after the crew is put in danger by the inhabitants of the planet. He also found that the cast would discuss any issues they had with the direction he gave to their characters. Despite Frakes being in the cast and having directed the previous two Star Trek films, Baird decided not to seek his opinion on the direction of the film. He said that there was no resentment on set, noting that Frakes was completing work on directing Clockstoppers at the time, and so likely could not have taken on directing Nemesis even if Baird had not been given the job. Baird had hoped that Nemesis would be enough of a success that he could consider whether to take the lead on a future 11 Star Trek film, cue laughter. Much of the cast have been very critical since, vocally speaking of a disdain for them and the franchise, though Marina Sirtis still claims this film is better than Insurrection. And a footnote by Mike, she's wrong.
Yeah, she is wrong.
Yeah, so I mean, we've kind of already talked about it. Obviously, Baird, not a Trek fan, wasn't really interested. Wanted to throw in things like car chases and stuff, which just has no place in a Trek film, really. And even the cast didn't get on with him. He showed them disdain. Apparently, I read somewhere he referred to LeVar Burton throughout as like Laverne or something ridiculously, dismissive.
Yeah, he apparently thought LeVar Burton was an alien. And I also hear, correct me if I'm wrong, but LeVar Burton could have was in the line to possibly be in the director's chair, and that makes me personally that. It hurts to me to think about that, because it may not have been perfect, but it certainly would have been better than what we got.
Exactly.
Yeah. Burton directed some good episodes of Trek for sure, so I didn't hear that, but I can believe it, and it would have been better. But I mean, again, everybody kind of already said, and a lot of the audience responses, like, why wouldn't you just give it to Frakes for a third time? But, clearly I didn't realize that we'd miss out on the cinematic masterpiece that was Clockstoppers if he had, so, I guess we can't really,
Hey, that movie is a part of my childhood, personally. I didn't even watch it because of Frakes. I just watched it because it was a Nickelodeon movie, and I watched Nick, and the premise alone sold me. But that was.
Is it more enjoyable than Nemesis?
Yeah. I mean, I will say that it is. I mean, it's definitely not a depressing. I mean, when one's about having a watch that gives you the ability to stop time, and another one is about, Picard's clone being like a creepy psychopath who, grows green, weird, veiny head stuff. You don't even have to be a Trek fan, or like anybody will tell you one definitely sounds more appealing than the other.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I commend you for starting a sentence with, and this film is about, and then actually trying to assign it some kind of, because what's it about? 1,000 things and nothing. I think really is the point. But yeah, I will say I forgive you for Clockstoppers, because I actually genuinely like Frakes' film Thunderbirds, but that's because I like that franchise.
I've got to be honest, I actually enjoyed that.
Yeah, and I will tell you, DK, yes, that is more fun than Nemesis.
Well, I've watched episodes of Crossroads that are more fun than Nemesis, let's be fair.
But I sympathise to a very small degree with people that, like, quite rightly say, and it's true of this film, like, don't put somebody in charge who has no affection for a genre piece whatsoever.
You have to know your audience. And if you don't know the fandom, then you don't know the audience.
It's not necessarily knowing the audience, it's just not treating your audience as if they're idiots. Yeah. And I think that's where a lot of the problems lie in this one, because as Mike was pointing out, you have things happen and you were just like, why is that happening again? Where did this come from?
Yeah. And knowing what makes a good story, because I mean, Nicholas Meyer, who directed Wrath of Khan and The Undercover Country, correct me if I'm wrong, but he was not a diehard Star Trek fan, but he clearly, when they brought him in, he clearly understands what makes a compelling story, character arcs, and whatnot, and that shows where it shows that it. Like I said, you don't necessarily need to understand the lore. You just need to understand what makes good storytelling, which also Baird clearly does not, at least in the context of these characters.
I can't believe someone watched Executive Decision and then looked at that and thought, that's the man.
Yeah, but that's my point, is that, like, I think it's with Meyer, it's not that he wasn't a fan, it's that he's a fan of things that are in the DNA of Star Trek, so he wanted to...
Well, I mean, you can go back and watch things like Time After Time and recognise it as a really good movie. So you can understand the thinking behind approaching Maya. With Baird, I just don't get the decision-making, other than surely it must have been cheap.
That's my point, though, is just like, it's when you try to, not just that you're not a fan, it's when you try to turn it into something that it's not, or that's not even a part of it. So, like, I think the problem here is that Baird turned it into wanted to turn it into a generic late 90s action movie. So, the kind of, the last couple of things I have are VFX, production design, music, and sound. So, DK, I'm going to come to you because I've kind of been abandoning you a little. So, do you have anything note-wise on these things?
It's all right. I'm living up to my avatar. Yes.
Not a merry man.
Production design. This movie, to me, it's just incredibly drab. It feels a lot like the Riemann Shinzon lighting issue is just used to disguise really lackluster sets for a lot of the time. I will point out that I will give kudos for bringing the Romulan shoulder pads out of the 80s.
I knew you were going to mention how the uniforms were better.
Yes. Although the foreheads are still laughable, but however miserable the Romulan costumes are, Shinzon and the Riemans look fabulous.
Oh my word. Shinzon's incredible pointy shoulder pads.
That is pure.
Sashay away, Shinzon.
Exactly.
He is
Absolutely.
serving Romulus and Remus realness, girl.
They're working those uniforms.
Yeah, like honestly, like can we recut that like seeing his Shinzon's introduction with just like, work it, girl, give it twirl.
Let's have Shinzon walk in catwalk style and have that be what causes them all to just melt.
Exactly.
Oh wow!
Have him walk down the steps
realness.
really provocatively. That would just look fantastic.
Oh, that honestly would make this movie like his big death scene where it's like Shinzon of Remus. I could never get your amazing costumes shins off my mind, and you never forget that. Now, sashay away.
Oh yeah. The outfits need help. I mean, definitely the uniforms of the Romulan has been needing help since the beginning of time.
I mean, mentioned that enough times in this series.
Yeah, it's become a drinking game at this point.
Yeah, they're really just bad, and they look uncomfortable. They don't look efficient for military.
I have a very quick note about the VFX production design then, which is that aside from the explosions, the ramming of the scimitar that we've mentioned by the Enterprise was not computer generated. The filming crew ran a model of the forward saucer into a model of the scimitar, shot it in slow motion, and hung it upside down to give the illusion of the hull flotsam drifting in space, which might be, I think, why it's so effective, because I always really love model work. I think it's more tangible. But no, I mean, I will say, I think there's some things that are quite clever. I like that we see Remus as the first thing in the movie to kind of give you the hint of that. And I love that the Romulan, even though probably is a CGI version, it's based on the kind of matte painting from Unification, the view of like Romulus's city capital, whatever you want to call it.
Yes.
It looks really cool. And I was actually really disturbed by the use of the weapon in that opening scene when I first saw this, partly because I wasn't feeling well anyway. I mentioned off air to DK I had like a winter flu. So opening the scene that way did make me feel quite disturbed and sick, I will say, because that wasn't so pleasant watching them all melt into nothing. I like the scimitar, as I said. I like the new Romulan warbirds, the ship ramming scene. That's about all I can say about the VFX production design, unless anybody wants to add anything. Nope.
No. Once I got past the Romulans' outfits, that was about it for me.
That's fair enough. They do look a lot more TOS influenced and kind of better, so I'll give you that.
Exactly.
I'll just quickly talk about the music and sounding. What can you really say? Serviceable, maybe?
Yeah. I mean, personally, I actually think it's very fitting and nice. I don't know what the name of the track is, but I think it's like, you hear it a lot during Scimitar where it's like that, dun, 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 or, dun, like, I'm not sure if I'm not...
I think that's the thing. It's like the 5-note kind of menacing theme for Shinzon and the Scimitar are nearby. And that's kind of something that he came up with, which is, it's distinct, I guess, but... Yeah, not really a lot else to say.
Yeah.
It wasn't very memorable. One thing about Star Trek is it has memorable music.
Oh yeah, a lot of the TOS films. Yeah.
I mean, when a Klingon scene is about to happen, like, that's very distinct kind of music. And I felt that what they chose for the Shinzon was it needed to be a little bit more ominous. I don't think it was ominous enough. I think it was a little too peppy.
It was maybe a bit subtle because I didn't notice it. And fair play if you did, Justin. But for me, I was just kind of like, I didn't really notice anything other than the sort of standard Trek fare and blue skies. So.
Oh yeah. I personally like the music used in the Battle of the Basin Rift. Like I like a lot of the underscoring of that personally. Like that. Okay. I mean, that's probably the only part of the music that really the only. Just going over the movie in my brain, that's probably one of the only tracks or parts of the score that really stood out to me. But I don't know. I think that part of the movie's well composed, in my opinion.
Okay, cool.
It wasn't until the credits were rolling I thought, is this actually Jerry Goldsmith?
It was one of his last scores.
Yeah, that is sad.
Mm. But
when you look at things like First Contact, and that is just so memorable. And
I mean, look at the DS9 and Voyager themes.
Yeah, so so great. There's pieces of music, and then everything about this just screams mediocre, and it's a shame.
Yeah. Well, we'll see what everyone else thinks, because the next thing we were going to move to, trying to keep this not super long, would be the audience response section.
Incoming transmission.
And I will preface this by saying thank you so much to everyone who commented. We probably aren't going to be reading it out, if you're listening to this, your particular thing, because I had to cherry pick a few, because the sheer amount of responses I got, there must have been like 1,000 people responded across various social medias. So I've kind of had to cherry pick a few. So, congrats if you're one of the few that got read out, and apologies if you haven't been. But I really appreciate all of you contributing, and I did read them all, and there's some great, thoughts. Everyone was pretty respectful, even those who disliked the movie. But yeah, what I've done, I've split up the audience response between myself and DK, so you're not just listening to one of us droning. So DK, would you like to go first, or would you like me to start us off?
I'll go first. I'll get some of this out of the way. We'll start off with the Facebook Strange New Worlds group. Joel David says he'll give it 1 star for the set designs. Ferg O'Riordan said that they loved this movie, while Matt Rodriguez said it's awful, self-indulgent, nonsensical drivel, 0 stars, and tied with Trek 5. Bobby Reason says he still has the DVD. Commiserations there, Bobby. Dave Chavez says 5 stars. Okay. Michael Gears says almost as bad as Star Trek 5. Peter Langstaff says, I watched this last night on 4K disc. Don't know why it gets so much hate. I love this movie. Gon Finnegan says, I like the movie, good story, plenty of action, didn't appreciate that Data died. That's the reason the movie's got slated and its release date on the same day as one of the Lord of the Rings movies. Lee Miller gave it 0 out of 5. What else we got? Eric Lee Umfres gave it 3 out of 5, as did Andrew Yavalo. Rob Scruggs gave it 3.5 stars. Would have been better had they let Jonathan Frakes direct. Baird was a disaster as a director. Benjamin Stanley says Star Trek Nemesis is actually a great movie when you treat it as an episode of Next Generation and not as the finale to Next Generation itself, which it was meant to be at the time. But now Picard Season 3 helped provide a new finale to the Next Generation, which in turn helped redeem Nemesis. So that's it for Strange New Worlds group, Mike. So if you want to go over to you for a bit, and then I'll come back to me.
Yeah, sure. Talking of from the Star Trek Facebook group, so simply called Star Trek, Wyatt Sullivan says 2 out of 5 stars. David Gramillion says 2 out of 5, not as bad as Insurrection, but still pretty lousy. I've given my thoughts on that. So there we go. Randall Craig Bland, very appropriate name, says Nemesis was a very good movie. Ironically, I give it 4 out of 5 stars. It was well written, and I think Tom Hardy did well. I got choked up when Data died too. Scott Gates says it was a 2 out of 5. It had a few good moments, but wasn't that good overall. Bruce Wilcox says 2. Was that an odd or even numbered Star Trek? Davis Pratt says 2.5 out of 5. There are some great moments, especially with Data, but the villain plot doesn't really come together for me. Robert Jones Sr. simply says, I love it. Paul Attridge just says 3. Graham Pearson says 2 out of 5, but the Ron scene I really don't like is the buggy. WTF, they thought that was a good idea. And then he's just put a hand in the head emoji. I feel that. Lyndon Thomas says 3 out of 5. Jane Poulter says, love it. Jason says, terrible, doesn't make sense at all. Insurrection was the start of the downfall. Nemesis just stamped it. Paul de Maria Mañas says 2 out of 5. Brandon Braverman Saltiel says 2 for the theatrical version, 4 for the director's cut we never got. Brackets, all the best character moments were deleted. Amber Anyen Solara says 6 out of 5. Tom Hardy was perfection. A little biased, but okay. Jesse Ubdegrove says 4 out of 5. And from my personal Facebook, I had a response from Tyler Weddle, who says 2 out of 5. Picard had enough in his rogues gallery to use as a compelling villain for this outing. Bring Denise back as Seela. Oh, don't know about that. And get rid of all the clone talk, and she can do everything Shinzon did. Drop the B4 plot and give Deanna, Worf, Beverly, or Geordi a spotlight moment. The last 3 movies were all about Data and Picard. Riker even has a built-in nemesis in Tom. In my rewrite, Tom was liberated from the Cardassian prison camp by the Romulans during the Dominion War. I'm happy where I got that idea. Seela employs Tom Riker, mercenary, to distract the Enterprise crew when they arrive as ordered. For an unprecedented peace mission, little did they know their Romulan hostess commands a loyal army and a new superweapon capable of destroying Earth. And I have a little bit more, but shall I pass over to you for another Facebook group, DK?
Yeah, go on. This one is Ships of the Line Facebook group, and we'll start off with James Withers. He says, I'll give it 4 out of 5. Alex Doucet, on the other hand, he says he gives it 0.5 out of 5 with a 0.5 margin of error. Michael Potts says, a lousy premise, weak execution, the nail in the coffin of that era. Hi Jack Nguyen says it was way better than Insurrection and Generations. I only hated the fact that the Enterprise E got so outclassed by the Scimitar. And John Thompson gives it 3 out of 5. Dustin Christ says, I remembered reading the leaked script with all the deleted scenes and I loved it. The film was good but not great. Seemed like all the good stuff was edited out for big action. Baird is an excellent editor, see Casino Royale, but Frakes really should have helmed it. Daniel Payton says 1 out of 5 stars, promised a movie about Romulans, gave us Remans instead. Attempted to have several big moments that fell pathetically flat. It would have been a poor 2-part episode. Bobby LaFrance says, I like this movie, 4 out of 5. Premise of environment shaping your development, and Picard's clone was interesting. Tom Hardy was great. Spiner and Stewart were fantastic. Burton's reaction to knowing Data might not come back was very emotional too. I think the problem with this movie was the ending. It just didn't fit. Stephen Webster says, I would give it a solid 3.5. Damien McElvogue says, it's because of this movie we got season 3 of Picard, which in my opinion is peak Star Trek. It was worth the 20-year wait. Bobby Mack says 4 out of 5. The death of Data took away 1 point. At the time, Brent thought he could not look young forever to play Data. Now with the Picard show, they brought him back 20 years later. Greg Harris says, let's have a look. 2.5 out of 5. Half a point off just for the Argo sequence alone. And then a facepalm emoji. Adrian Ely gave it 2 out of 5. And then says, not that good, as well as Generations not good. Russ Cup says, I did not like the Picard clone aside from shaving his head. I don't think he looked or sounded like him. They'd have been better off having Stewart play both roles. That said, I did enjoy the battle. Daryl Duncan says, a few interesting concept, but poor execution, 2 stars. And the second star is only because I really like the designs of the Romulan ships. And final one out of this group, Brian Sweet. He says 2.5 stars out of 5 for me. Just a bad premise for a studio movie. Plus, killing off a fan favourite felt forced with no emotional effect. So I'll go over to you again, Mike.
All right, moving outside of Facebook then, from Threads, Camos Mills says, I get some of the criticism, but never the hate. I enjoy it. From the Hit or Miss Star Trek Instagram page, JCR2 says, one of the worst Trek movies. Jordan LaForden, hi Jordan, we've had her on as a guest a few times, says, I love Nemesis. It has one of the best film scores in Trek. It's visually stunning and Tom Hardy's performance is great. Shinzon's a believable villain, and as is the B4 scavenger hunt he sends them on. Data's sacrifice is super meaningful, and the events in the film are a perfect springboard for Picard Season 1, which I also love. My one big complaint is the Deanna Troi being assaulted. What an old and unnecessary trope. There are other obstacles women can overcome to find empowerment. Definitely agree with a lot of your points there, Jordan. Yeah. My Figure Universe just gives it 3 stars. And moving over to the website that will forever be called Twitter, screw you, Elon Musk, Connie UK_Locutus says, Troi has a horrible wedding dress. B4, just everything. Mad Max style first contact with unsafe velocities. Shins on, lame. The slowest weapon startup ever. Crap ending, should have been the Enterprise leaving space dock a la the motion picture. Still lots of cool pew pew pew. And I responded, ironically, I did just read an interview where Marina says she loved the wedding dress and it was better than the one she wore in real life. Okay. Thomas Labanick at T Labanick says, I enjoyed it. It definitely gets a lot more hate than it should. 4 stars. At Daniel Graz4 says, good memory seeing it in theaters. Overall disappointed and sad about Data, but couldn't wait for the next one when they used B4 to resurrect him like Spock. Then disappointed that never came until Picard. Way better than Insurrection. Color with Wonder says, I always ugly cry when Data dies. I can't help it. Jim Z at HoM Theater _Z says, slightly worse than Spock's brain. #horrible. The Clone Star podcast, hey guys, say, oh Lord, I found it such a struggle to get through. It hasn't improved or aged well with time. Also, who the heck was the guy driving the Dune buggy? Because it sure wasn't Picard.
The Dune buggy.
I mean, that is true. It definitely was not bad.
Oh yeah, it was a very unconvincing stunt double. But at Starwolf_Oakley says something as simple as more TNG characters appearing at the Riker Troi wedding would have improved matters. I don't know about that. It's already baffling that Wesley crushes there for no reason and with no explanation. But okay. Melissa A. Nathan says, I say 4 stars. Does it have issues? Yes. Would it have been better with a different director and maybe sticking closer to the original screenplay? Yes. Data's death is sad, but Spiner co-wrote the story and wanted that, so it doesn't make me mad. And that's it. That's all I have for the audience response. So, yeah, move on.
I've still got you. Give me so much, Mike.
Oh, you have more. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, this is the Star Trek Wholesome posting group. Oh. Kelly Wright says, I love it. I get why some folks don't, but I really do. While JS Picture says 1 out of 5 and then just explains it with the Argo. Chris Hyatt says the beginning 10 minutes and the ending about 20 minutes are the only watchable parts of the movie. And I'm sorry, doing Deanna dirty again and slightly more literally than usual, just so that you can get it back at the end, always felt ick to me. He's give it 3 out of 10. He says it's the second worst movie for the franchise, next to Into Darkness, with a 0.5 out of 10. Eric Spartan says it's still better than Generations. Ted H. Olson says evil clones are evil, and quite a bit of that runtime is wasted trying to convince the audience otherwise. However, the scenes between Picard and Shinzon are really well done. 3 out of 5, not great, but undeserving of the hate. Damien Paul just shouts out Ron Perlman and Jim from Neighbours. Josiah Miller says, for me, 1.5 stars out of 5. I did not like this movie. It was not wholly without redeeming qualities, but there weren't many. They should have just double cast with Patrick Stewart as Shinzon. Mick Whittaker says, not a fan, in all honesty, 1.5 out of 5. The plot was essentially recycled bits from all over, like the later Abrams reboot. They didn't really give Shinzon a compelling reason to attack Earth. He was going to do it because reasons. At least in Beyond, the villain had a grudge. Brenda Sukov says, probably one of my least favourite of all the Star Trek movies. Kieran Stephen, based on all the... I'll come back to that one. Jeremy Martin says he actually liked it a lot. John Douglas says, oh, you think Into Darkness is your ally, but you merely adopted the dark. I was born into... Yeah. I didn't see the light until I was already a man. By then it was nothing to me but blinding. David Brand.
Yes, perfect.
Yes, we did find it. We did. Oh, God, I can't believe we both looked for it and didn't see it before. David Brand says, great movie like all Trek movies. Andrew West says, Tom Hardy did a great job given the role he was hired for and the script he had to read. I remain frustrated at Star Trek, Picard era, hang-ups on Commander Data's journey. It kind of felt like Star Wars fixation on the Skywalkers when there was a whole galaxy out there of stories. Mark Bailey says, it's not great. The cast thought the director was not good. Marina Sirtis was pretty direct about it. The only good thing I think there is about it is that, as some have often pointed out, it really shows how important it is that you back up your data.
Oh, my word.
Yeah. Jeremy Orr says it has a few decent moments, though I can't think of them offhand, honestly. But it's right down there with Into Darkness as my least favourite Trek film. Phil MCP says the scenes with Picard in the Romulan Senate office showed real potential and the wedding was fun, but overall a swing and a miss. And yeah, going back to Kieran Stephen, which is my favourite comment on this, he says, based on all of the comments, it sounds like we need a director's cut using a new director.
I think that's kind of sums up everybody's thoughts on this. Yeah, even those that like it are like, but the director, maybe change him. So, fair enough. So, yeah, I mean, it's safe to say it's not universally despised. There was a few people that really like it, but divisive at the very least. I think we can call the movie. So, yeah. I'm going to move us along then because we don't have a lot of time. Just to the favourite character moment in line, which again, if you're new to us, that's just something we always do on our Trek or movie reviews.
That's Spock.
So I'm going to go around the clock, as it were, and ask first of all for everyone's favourite character. And Nita, we'll begin with you on this one, if you don't mind.
Well, I love it when they're on the planet and they're collecting B4, and Worf goes, "It's you," and and he goes, "No, it's not."
Yeah.
I mean, my favorite, I would say, character of this particular movie. I'm gonna keep it classic. I think Data. and Picard are my favorites to see on screen in this movie, since it was mainly about them.
Okay, fair enough. And what about you, Justin? Your favorite character in the movie?
Yeah, I'd say either Data, because he has, in the end, what is probably his most human moment in the entire arc up to that point. I think that what he did is probably the most human thing he could have ever possibly done. But also honorable mention to Riker and that smooth back.
Yeah, fair enough. That's smooth back indeed. And since we've gotten both from Nita, what's your favorite moment in the movie then, Justin?
Yeah, my favorite moment I would say would probably be the, ramming the Enterprise into the scimitar, because like I said, it's a practical effect shot, and they very well executed practical shot, and they've never, no pun intended, they've never gone there before.
Yeah.
So
you took mine as well, because my exact note is the Enterprise ramming the scimitar for my favorite moment. So I'll just get that there. We clearly agree with each other on that one. So cool. And my favorite character I said was Picard, and because I think this is in some ways a better ending for him than the show. And it was nice to get him. His character at least felt like it had come to a conclusion at this point. But regardless, DK, to you, favorite character and moment.
Favorite character, it's going to be another for Data. For me, provides what little amount of emotional connection can be gained from this movie. And favourite scene, it's both you and Justin stole mine, so yeah, it's the ramming scene.
Wow, okay, fair enough. And do we all have a line we can shout out as our favourite line? And DK, I'll come to you first to give the guests a chance to think, maybe.
I have a couple. Neither of them are particularly very good, but they're the standouts for me. I like the one in The Office where Shinzon says, "You don't trust me," and Picard says, "I have no reason to." And the other one, which I like because it gave me one of the moments of levity in this fireball of mediocrity. It's the one where Data says, "It appears to be a robotic arm," and Worf says, "Very astute."
And it was a chance to give Worf a line. So cool. Do you have a line you can shout out, Justin, for us?
Yeah, I was thinking about that. Like, I think maybe keeping on the moment, on the idea of levity, and also as a shout out, the Janeway cameo when she goes, "You seem to get all the easy assignments." Or
the Romulans, the Sona, the Borg.
Yeah, exactly. It's another lighthearted. You're just lucky, Admiral. That feels much more Trek and much more cute and has levity.
Now, where's the coffee?
Yeah, in that nebula.
Yes, exactly.
Cool. What about you, Nita? Do you have a line you wanted to mention?
I love it when Picard says, "Shut up, Data."
I did it.
Thank God it wasn't me for once.
Awesome. My favourite line is actually at the end of the movie. It's when Picard's talking about Data, because I think it's really cool. He says, "His wonder, his curiosity about every facet of human nature allowed all of us to see the best parts of ourselves. He evolved, he embraced change because he always wanted to be better than he was." I think that explains why we all love Data and why he's a great character. Lady Vian doesn't like him. Boo! You want to boo Lady Vian? Boo! So, then the last thing we would normally do would be our conclusion and score. But I did promise you all a haiku as well as the limerick that you got earlier. Yeah. Again, apologies if you're a fan of the movie. Haikus, as you probably all are aware, is basically a poetic art form where you have to come up with 3 lines, 5 syllables, then 7, then 5. And I tried to put the entire plot of the movie into this. And oversimplified, maybe. And my haiku simply goes, "Picard has a clone and Data has a brother. Now let's find a plot."
That's excellent. That's excellent.
Alrighty then.
Right. So with that all done, then we're going to move to our conclusion and a score out of 5 Starfleet Deltas, or 5 stars. And again, give the guests a chance to gather their thoughts because they may not have known about this coming. So do you want to start us off, Tiki? Or
yeah, I'll go for it. I don't hate this, but I can fully appreciate why others do. It's clunky. It throws everything against the wall in the hope that something will stick. It has the laziest plotting, incredibly strange, in parentheses, bad directing choices in places, and it features the Romulans. And after everything in the show, it is pretty much, for me, the capstone to their dreary form of shadiness. They're everything stereotypical in the franchise concerning this race. And yet, weirdly enough, I do have a kind of affection for this, despite everything. It's certainly not the worst movie I've ever seen, though, let's be honest, for me, that's a low bar. It does remind me of a time in my life where Trek wasn't only a passion, but it was a lifeline when I felt very much alone in my life, and for that I will forever be grateful to this one. Having said that, I've sat down and watched Star Trek V 10 times more than I have this over the years, so make of that what you will. And I've given it 3.
Oh, wow, okay. 3 out of 5?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it's come on, it's Trek. The worst Trek is better than a lot of other things.
I'm probably going to go next so that we can at least end on a high, I suspect, because I've got a feeling the other two will probably score higher than me. So I'll just say, where do I start? There's a lot wrong with this movie. While I don't doubt that franchise fatigue is responsible for at least some of the negative response, there are very definitely things that just don't work and problems that seem impossible to ignore. The script is a mess, with Data's subplot seemingly shoehorned in to satiate Spiner's desire for his glorious Spock moment. The villain motivations flip-flop depending on the script's need at any given time. We have very little to do with the Romulans, and the new things we do get suck, looking at you Nosferatu remans. Several good actors are wasted, and Tom Hardy gives a performance with enough ham and cheese to make Subway jealous, though a fair amount of that is due to the writing he's given. The director's disdain for Star Trek comes through also with a rather phoned-in feel and too many scenes that just look awful, from lighting to cinematography to staging. It's not all a complete disaster, though. I can see why there are people that like this. Stuart, Spiner, and the Next Gen cast give great performances. There are individual acting showcase moments that are brilliant, captivating, and emotive. The ending, too, really hit me emotionally and is one thing that does work for me, along with the ship effects, space battles, and the glorious Janeway cameo. In the end, though, this was and is just such a disappointment for me. Very definitely a contender for worst Trek movie, and I'm grateful that it wasn't the end of the Next Generation story after all. And I actually gave it 1.5 stars out of 5.
Ooh.
So, yeah.
Painful.
Ouchies.
And we'll come to you next, Nita, I think, and ask if you've got a conclusion and a score of 5 stars for it.
Oh, wow. Okay, so I like that they started the new chapter of Riker's life and Deanna's life, which I felt was a long time coming. I mean, I know that he was number one favorite, but I think they could have included him as a captain of a different ship alongside the Enterprise somehow and moved him along. I think keeping him there for 15 years made him the longest running first officer. And I don't know. It did. I thought it was great that they gave him this. They ended the what we thought would be the ending. You know, the closure of TNG with him moving on and them being married. I thought ending Data was actually a good thing because I felt like they needed to bring closure to Data's life because, you know, the actor isn't an android. And I thought that him going heroically, saving his captain would be the way he would do it. And I love the cameos with Janeway. She was fantastic. I love the interaction in the dinner scene with Shinzon and uh, Captain Picard, and I thought that it was very intense, very. I thought it was very emotional to see the same person with two different lives, and having these two different viewpoints in life. You know, if you would take road A, this is what your thought process would be. If you take road B, here's what your thought process would be. So I like that. Overall, I did enjoy the movie. You know, and I'm actually going to give it a 4.
Wow, okay.
4 stars.
That's cool. I'm glad we've got people that kind of represent both sides so it doesn't feel like I'm just basically crapping on it and not giving it a fair shake. But yeah, I agree with a lot of your points as well, to be fair. So yeah. And so Justin, we come to you last then. What did you think of the film and a score out of 5, please?
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say, yeah, it's easily not the best Trek movie, but I mean, I also, like, there's a lot of very solid premises and ideas going on, as well as a few tired and, as was mentioned, inappropriate ones. And there's a few moments where it ends up becoming more than the sum of its parts. So, but like it's not without its bright spots. And so, I mean, all in all, I think as has been said, there is Trek is still better than other things. Like, I mean, I would never go so far as to say it's almost like, The Room or the Cats movie or something like that. Like, it's definitely, it's not that type of, like, I wouldn't say, like, I couldn't even, like, if this was like a essay I had to grade, I would give it maybe like, a D- or something like that, because I still see it passes for me, but it, still like has clear areas of improvement in that. And like I said, it's got, some thrilling action, and at the end of the day, for me, like I'm just happy to be with these characters doing almost anything. So I mean, I'm grateful just for that in that regard. So it all balances out, I would say, to a 3 out of 5.
3 out of 5. Okay.
Yeah.
So you're basically in agreement with DK on that one. That's fair enough.
Yeah, basically.
Cool. Well, like I said, that's a kind of a fair assessment, I think, for everyone. In any case, I add the scores together and divide by the 4 of us here to give us our final score for Star Trek Nemesis, and Star Trek Nemesis gets a final score of 2.9 out of 5. So, yeah, I mean, a couple of us gave it a 3, and it's virtually there. So I think that's, I did a little tiny bit of rounding up. It was actually 2.875, but, we'll round it up to a 2.9. Why not? I think that makes the most sense. And, yeah, that's probably the fairest. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to come to each of you individually. So, Nita, where can people find you around the internet, and, of course, the Sci-Fi Queens podcast?
Just look me up in Sci-Fi Queens. We are podcast streams on YouTube, so it's Sci-Fi Queens. Just literally
good
that.
watch, I'll say that.
Find us. Thank you. You can find us on you can find us on TikTok. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat. We're kind of everywhere, and on YouTube is where our podcast airs.
Fantastic. And I believe you're joining us again on the Silver Screen podcast in a few weeks to review Planet of the Apes.
So. Absolutely.
Cool. Look forward to that one. Justin, what about you? Do you want to shout out where people can find you on the internet, or is it more of a avoiding people situation?
Oh yeah, like I said, if you haven't already blocked me because of what I've said about Star Wars fans, you can find me on the Meta apps, or the Threads and Instagrams at Justin Avery Smith, or the non-meta ones, because even before the buyout, Twitter wouldn't let me use my full name because of character limits, so it had to be at Just a Very Smith, because that's who I am. I am just a very Smith. I
love that.
That's actually pretty cool.
Yeah, hey, innovations can flourish given restrictions and that sort of thing. No, but that same thing on like the Blue Sky and TikTok. It's the same thing. So if Mark Zuckerberg owns it, it's Justin Avery Smith. If Mark Zuckerberg doesn't own it, just a very Smith.
Cool. Awesome. And DK, you still having fun in that cave?
Yeah. Screw social media.
You can just find DK on the podcast. It's the one time he crawls out and talks to other humans.
No, I do occasionally join in on Facebook, so I am there, but only for people that I add.
Fair enough. And again, I'll have something on screen that will mention all the places that you can find our podcast, whether it be Hit or Miss Star Trek or Silver Screen podcast, depending on what you're watching. I won't go through them all, but you can always find them in the episode descriptions of wherever you're watching or listening. We have a link tree with them all there. And as I say, if you are watching on YouTube, you can see that banner thing that I've made that has them all handily available there for you. So you can always pause if you're stuck and write them down from there as well. So yeah, it's been a great episode. I've really enjoyed this. Hopefully you've enjoyed listening. We will be back in about a month's time on the Trek podcast with a review of Next Generation's The Defector. And we'll be back in much sooner on the Silver Screen podcast with a review, I think in a week or a week and a half's time or so. We're reviewing Spielberg's adaptation of Ready Player One. So stick around. We're busy on both podcasts, and we're still going all gears. But yeah, in the meantime, again, thanks so much for joining us. If you have, thanks to our guests. And remember, we are Starfleet. Live long and prosper.
Live
long and prosper.
Long and prosper.
Indeed. And in the epic words of Arnie, we'll be back.
You have been listening to the Hit or Miss Star Trek podcast, hosted by Michael Wilson and DK. Produced and edited by Mike Wilson. Additional material by DK. Please remember to like this episode and spread it throughout subspace. Subscribe to the Hit or Miss YouTube channel and follow us online. Links to all of our social media pages can be found via the link tree listed in the episode's description. For any queries or to apply to be a guest on the show, you can also email homstartrek@gmail.com. This podcast is part of the Mike's Podcasts Network. You can listen to this and our sister podcasts on all good podcast providers by searching for Mike's Podcasts. Hit or Miss Podcast was based on an idea by Michael Wilson and Will Templer. Thank you for joining us. We hope you'll be back, but for now, hailing frequencies closed.
Gotta warp out of here at once, maximum speed.